While scores of people have lost their lives in flooding, torrential rains have also caused other disasters. Like here behind me, the mud up there became loose because of continuous rainfall and slipped all the way down onto this, which used to be a two-story house. 9 people were killed here. There was one family, some relatives and some neighbors as well. And that's really how difficult this rescue operation is, because it's not just about evacuating people who are stranded in flooded areas. A large part of Kerala is also hilly, so it's also about taking people who might be at risk in parts like these out of here. Now, thousands of troops have already been pressed into action and more are coming in from other parts of the country. Airlift operations are being conducted. People are being rescued by boat, basically any way possible. India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi has been in the state assessing the damage, and there is a real sense of fear and despair among people here about just when is this night.
Next to the raging wildfires in the west, more than a dozen burning across California alone, firefighters working feverishly to save homes. That snapshot of a torched block in Redding telling a continuing story. Some homes miraculously spared, other families now returning to nothing but ash. ABC's Marcus Moore on the new threat tonight.
Tonight, on the front lines of the holy fire here in Lake Elsinore in Southern California, airdrop after airdrop, the flames dangerously close to William Collins' home. He's seeing it tonight for the first time since evacuating.
You just walk away and it's up to Mother Nature.
Grabbing water hoses to ward off the flames, helping armies of firefighters in their around-the-clock battle.
We were fighting the fire all across this hill, trying to defend this other property.
The fire, the work of an alleged arsonist now behind bars, about 29% contained. At least 14 large fires burning across California. New wildfires erupting to the north.
Fires jumped over the ridge down here, and we've never seen it this bad.
Families leaving in a moment's notice.
Grab maybe the first half a dozen most valuable things to us, and then the rest can just burn.
And the relentless, historic car fire, unpredictable in its destruction. One side of this neighborhood reduced to ashes, the other untouched by the flames. And with this battle is still underway, just behind me here you can see they are continuing to drop flame retardant on these flames that flared up this afternoon along these hills. They are trying to keep this fire from spreading. Whit.
All right, Marcus Moore, thank you. From fires in the west to flash floods in the east, strong storms and torrential downpours from Virginia to Massachusetts. New York City's skyline smothered in dark clouds in that time-lapse video right there. ABC's senior meteorologist Rob Marciano in Central Park tonight. Rob, more heavy rain in areas that really don't need it.
You're right about that, Whit. We are saturated, and here in Central Park, already a record rain for the day. And as you can see, it is still raining here. We've got ongoing flood warnings in areas in New Jersey and Pennsylvania. Some of these spots there, and on Long Island, over 4 inches of rain already, and flash flood watches now posted from northern Virginia all the way up through southern New England. So you see the heavy pulses of rain that will be moving through tonight and then kind of congregating around the mid-level low and stall front down around the mid-Atlantic. D.C., Baltimore gets it heaviest. And then look at Monday as we head through the work week, looking at more heavy rain across the Northeast. That coverage beginning to spread out. So as you mentioned, this is over areas that don't need the rain. It's been exceedingly wet across the east this summer, and there's more rain over the next 48 hours. Whit.
Now, wet weekend in the east. Rob, thank you.
An immense tragedy. We are watching it in Italy after a bridge linking northern Italy to France collapses this morning. Cars crashing 150 feet to the ground. At least 22 people are dead. More could be trapped in the rubble. We go to Amy Kellogg now, live in Milan. Hi, Amy.
Hi, Julie. Well, on top of the dead and the injured, physically injured, there are so many people being treated right now for shock. And frankly, no one really knows how many people may be trapped under the rubble. So the priority for rescue workers really is to go through those virtual mountains of twisted steel and concrete and try to get to anyone who is alive. Now, this is the moment it happened this morning. You can hear someone yelling, "Oh my God, oh my God." A 600-foot section of the Morandi Bridge outside Genoa just collapsing. And you hear a man yelling, "Dio, oh my God." The bridge is part of the highway, the A10, that runs between Italy and France. A column collapsed after sudden violent storms just before noon today. As many as 30 trucks and cars fell when the section of bridge collapsed, sending those vehicles to a 300-foot fall. There are so many heart-stopping images from this tragedy. Among them, the picture of this truck at the edge of the precipice stopped just before the bridge fell. Now, the cause is said to be something structural, but authorities will need some time to figure out exactly what that was. The bridge was inaugurated in 1967. It was often called the Brooklyn Bridge locally for its similarities to the one in New York, and it was quite an icon of the area. It had had work done on it periodically over the years. Now, some other urgent matters right now, Julie, besides trying to get to anyone who may be alive. There was also a footbridge section of that bridge, so it is possible that there are pedestrians who fell as well. But importantly and urgently, they need to find out whether the other parts of the bridge are actually secure, that no other parts fall. And then also, authorities are going to need to figure out ways to get all the vacationers back, because there will be a lot of people traveling back from Ligurian seaside resorts like Portofino and also from France. Tomorrow is Ferragosto, the big Italian summer holiday, which stretches for several days. So within the next week or so, there's going to be an immense amount of traffic, and there is really no suitable alternate route.
Here in Schloss Merseburg, about an hour's drive from Berlin, talks have been ongoing between Chancellor Merkel and President Putin in the government residence just behind me here. Despite their previous rocky relationship, Mrs. Merkel and Mr. Putin have been pushed together into a sort of political marriage of convenience due to a rift with the United States. Both countries have been affected by US tariffs. Russia has been affected by sanctions. Mrs. Merkel has been criticised by Trump for being overly reliant on Russian gas imports. They did have points on which they did agree, Syria being one of the key ones, both of them agreeing that emphasis on humanitarian assistance was the key to solving the conflict.
Does everybody like the press? No. They can make anything bad because they are the fake, disgusting news.
It wasn't until I became a politician that I realized how nasty, how mean, how vicious, and how fake the press can be.
And I like real news, not fake news. You're fake news.
Do you regret
Thank you, everybody.
The United Kingdom has become a mere shadow of the nation that gave us freedom of speech, freedom of the press, a host of other rights that we take for granted but probably should not take for granted. Nobody knows that better than Tommy Robinson. In May of this year, he was arrested for attempting to cover the trial of a sexual grooming gang in the UK. For speaking out loud on the sidewalk, he was taken to prison. With barely any time to muster a defense, he was tried and sentenced to 13 months in jail. Now, after more than 2 months behind bars in solitary confinement, during which time he was attacked by journalists in the UK. Almost nobody defended him. But tonight he has been released on bail after winning an appeal. Tommy Robinson joins us now for his first and only interview. Tommy Robinson, thank you very much for agreeing to talk to us. I know that you've spent the last 2.5 months by yourself in a cell, so you're probably feeling a little bit bewildered to be out. Tell us what it was like for you behind bars.
For me, behind bars, the way I was treated, I was taken to a prison with quite a low Muslim population. What I'm known for is criticising Islam, so there's been many planned attempts to murder me and kill me in this country. I was taken to a prison with a low Muslim population of 7%, where things were relatively normal. I was separated from other prisoners, but the prison officers made sure they opened my doors multiple times during the day, and they took me out to play pool and snooker with themselves. I was then taken from that prison and transferred to another prison. And I was transferred to the prison with the largest Muslim population in the UK for a CCAT prison. I was then put on solitary confinement, where I spent 2 months
not seeing or speaking to anybody, and they used the reason that I was in danger. Now, they would have had risk assessments before I went there. I was purposely taken to be put in danger so that then that reason can be used to then put me on solitary confinement. And if you think about what has happened in this case, it took a number of hours to take me before a court, prosecute me, unlawfully imprison me, and then it took 2 months with the prisons moving me to prevent my legal access, shortening my legal visits, and it took months before I got the opportunity to go before a judge. Once the judge heard what had happened in the trial, we found so many illegal and wrongdoings within this kangaroo court that then it took another 2 weeks before I was freed. And to be honest, this whole encounter, if you talk about, I haven't eaten. I've lost nearly 40 pounds in prison. I had one tin of tuna and a piece of fruit a day. I was supposed to be in Her Majesty's prison service, not Guantanamo Bay. I couldn't open my windows because I was having excrement and spit put through them. I believe this whole process, and Tucker, this isn't the first.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but who was putting excrement through your window and spit through your window?
So my prison cell that I was put in was on the lower level, the ground level, which it didn't have to be. So it's on the ground level. So every prisoner would walk past my cell window, everyone as they walk out. So when my windows were open, every prisoner's walking past. The mosque for the prison was directly opposite my cell. So every time, and we've had huge heat waves, I was literally drenched day to day, and I had excrement and spit thrown through the doors, through my windows. So in the end, I had completely blocked up windows, had to block up all of my cell windows. And all of this, when I say this, to a lot of people around the world, this current case, and the world has watched it, has shocked them. For me, this has been nothing new. There's some things I have not spoke about in the past, where in 2012, I spent 5 months on solitary confinement in the British prison. This goes against every human right and every law. I spent 5 months on solitary. When I come out, I was diagnosed with a form of post-traumatic stress disorder. I've never spoke about that publicly because I don't want to insult members of the military who have witnessed war and try and compare being locked in a cell and on solitary confinement to that. But my medical records are fully aware, that the authorities are fully aware of them, the government are fully aware of them, the prison service are fully aware of them. They know what that did to me. They know what I went through after that.
But I guess, may I interrupt you? I just want our viewers to understand why this happened to you in the first place. You went to prison in a supposedly free country for expressing unfashionable opinions in public. Did you, with this last round, you've been in jail for 2 months, did you hit anybody? Did you steal anything? Or did you say something the government didn't like?
There was a court case going on where 29 people were in court for gang raping up to 100 young children. Now, I stood outside the court and I spoke, and all I done was read a BBC News article that is still online now for millions of people to see. Now, and I was taken, and everyone would have watched the video. They said for a breach of the peace. They transported me to a police custody, and then my solicitor contacted the police custody. Then they emailed my solicitor, which my solicitor has this email, saying I was being released. Then they took me in a van back to the court through the back door. They put me up before a judge, and media reports have said that I pled guilty. At no point was I even asked whether I was guilty or not guilty. I was not even told, and I still, to this point now, have not been told and do not know what it is I'm deemed to have done wrong. In a British court of law, for a fair trial for anyone, they have to understand what it is they're being accused of. Contempt of court. That's all I've been told. What contempt of court? I was fully aware outside that court. I made sure to point out that these men are innocent until proven guilty. I said alleged. I was non-confrontational. There is not the judges, and I know the law, the judges have no power to issue reporting restrictions on anybody, on any information that is already in the public domain. I was taken and whisked away, and what we've seen this week is the highest judge in our country has completely condemned this as flawed, completely criticised the handling of this case, the kangaroo court style it was to imprison me. And my biggest concern with it is, at this time, that when this has happened, and so many people, I say thank you to the Middle East Forum, a thank you to Congressman Gosar, a thank you to Ambassador Brownback, people, thank you to yourself, Tucker, people who come out, because we know that in this country, anyone who speaks about Islam, you can be a complete liberal. The minute you mention, criticise Islam, you are deemed and attacked by everybody. Now, and people put their neck on the line.
Let me just ask you now, did anyone defend you? I mean, even if people disagree with you, you would think some would say he has a right, this man has a right to express his opinions. Did anybody defend your right to say what you think is true?
Everyone of authority and every media company and mainstream media lined up to completely do hatchet jobs about why I should be in prison and how I deserve to be in prison. And the worst one, I'm reading a human rights lawyer defending why I should be in prison. Now, I'm in prison. I'm facing absolute. Yep. They know what they're doing to me. They know. At the time when I was in prison, they then come and see me in my prison cell and say, police are on their way to your house because there's intel there's going to be acid attacks against your wife. Now,
I'm sorry, Tommy. We're out of time, okay. And on that sad note, I wish you good luck in recovering from this and on the time you're going to take off. And I just want our viewers to understand that this has happened in a country that we believed was free, and without our vigilance, it could happen here. That's not hysteria. It's real. Tommy Robinson, thank you very much.
Yeah. When Alphabet CEO Sundar Pichai took the stage during the big I.O. conference in Mountain View earlier this year, he told the thousands of employees that the company has been reflecting on its responsibilities in the world.
So we know the path ahead needs to be navigated carefully and deliberately. And we feel a deep sense of responsibility to get this right.
Months later, his own workers would hold him to those ideals. Earlier this month, The Intercept reported that Google has been working on a secret project codenamed Dragonfly. Dragonfly was a censored version of its search engine for China. And so today, the New York Times broke the news about a protest letter signed by 1,400 employees. They wanted to, quote, raise urgent moral and ethical issues, saying, currently, we do not have the information required to make ethically informed decisions about our work, our projects, and our employment. We urgently need more transparency, a seat at the table, and a commitment to clear and open processes. Google employees need to know what we're building. Ann Skeet, a leadership ethics expert at Santa Clara University, calls them activist employees.
It is wise to listen to employees when they speak up. There's plenty of research that supports that the companies whose actual stock value does the best over time are those that manage their human resources effectively. And so this kind of engagement and listening to employees is certainly part of that.
For years, Silicon Valley companies have had a frustrating relationship with China, trying to gain a foothold there. Government censors have blocked companies like Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, and Twitter with the so-called Great Firewall. In 2010, Google pulled out its search engine after the company said they discovered evidence of government cyber attacks on its servers and attempted hacking of Gmail accounts of human rights activists. And who can forget the late Congressman Tom Lantos, a Holocaust survivor who publicly scolded Yahoo executives in a hearing back in the late 90s about cooperating with Chinese police.
Your abhorrent activities in China are a disgrace. I simply do not understand how your corporate leadership sleeps at night.
Skeet says it's understandable why tech companies keep coming back to China, the largest base of internet users in the world. But now, with this Google employee protest letter, it's complicated.
And China represents a great opportunity for them to grow their business. So it's natural that they would consider that, but they now have to balance out that desire for growth with the expressions of concern that they're coming from their own workforce.
The FCC is cracking down on conspiracy theorist Alex Jones, and they're not the only ones. But is it a violation of free speech? Chief Congressional Correspondent Mike Emanuel has our report from Capitol Hill.
Right now, Infowars.com has been taken down.
The FCC has shut down controversial host Alex Jones's Liberty Radio and slapped it with a $15,000 fine, which it won't pay. But the commission says it's been operating without a license since at least 2013, and Jones has a conspiracy theory about what went down.
Oh, it's just a private company. They can take you down. No, this is just so they are exponentially, I believe, beta testing ahead of a big event, civil unrest, assassination of Trump. Who knows what the false flag is or group of false flags.
Today, the FCC chairman appeared before the Senate Commerce Committee. Ajit Pai says Jones's station was taken down because he was violating the law, not because of the nature of his speech.
It is important to make clear that our pirate radio enforcement efforts, including this one, have nothing to do with the content that pirate radio stations air.
The FCC chairman says this type of enforcement doesn't typically get much attention.
Normally, our pirate radio enforcement efforts don't make national news, but this one has, because the pirate radio station in question was airing Alex Jones's show.
Jones is also getting squeezed by Apple removing his podcasts, Facebook, YouTube, LinkedIn, Spotify, even Pinterest. And there's also an issue with Twitter after he posted this video calling for people to get their battle rifles ready against the media. Chief Executive Jack Dorsey says he's hoping to modify Jones's tone by putting him in a Twitter timeout.
So whether it works within this case to change some of those behaviors and change some of those actions, I don't know. But this is consistent with how we enforce.
But President Trump has complained about Twitter shadow banning prominent Republicans and calling it a discriminatory and illegal practice.
While Jones with his conspiracy theories is an easy target, there are some who worry this is a slippery slope where people with different viewpoints could be silenced. Brett?
Mike Emanuel on the Hill. Mike, thanks.
Tonight, new concerns inside the U.S. defense community over a Russian military satellite exhibiting some very strange behavior. Our Brian Todd is on the story for us. Brian, why are officials keeping an eye on this particular piece of equipment? It's very interesting.
It is, Jim. They're doing that because this satellite seems to have done something that U.S. officials admit they have never seen before. It has birthed 2 other satellites, according to experts, and they're worried the Russians could use it as a weapon in space. Blasting off from a Russian cosmodrome, a Soyuz rocket surges into space. Its payload, a military satellite shrouded in mystery. That was in June of last year. Tonight, space and military analysts are investigating whether that satellite is the same one, which a top U.S. arms control official said this week was exhibiting, quote, abnormal behavior.
When you look at the entire Russian catalog, this satellite and its children are the ones that jump out as the ones that are acting in an unusual way.
The satellite's children? Experts at the firm Analytical Graphics, who've analyzed this satellite, believe the larger Russian satellite, quote, birthed a smaller satellite a couple of months later. Then, a couple of months after that, the smaller Russian satellite birthed an even smaller satellite.
Almost like a Russian nesting doll.
The Russian Ministry of Defense even announced the first birthing, saying the smaller satellite would, quote, inspect the condition of the larger one. But experts are worried the Russians could be testing it out for military purposes.
The fact that it's the MOD announcing it, the Ministry of Defense announcing that, and it's a secret mission, clearly that's, even if it's a test satellite, it's got some kind of military purpose in what it's testing.
What kind of military purpose? The Pentagon and U.S. Air Force Space Command won't say specifically what they believe the Russian satellites could do. But tonight, a U.S. military official tells CNN the Russians and other adversaries have turned space into a, quote, warfighting domain.
You could see the evolution of that technology in that a single satellite could then sort of give birth to multiple smaller satellites, which would principally be potentially kinetic weapons. Of course, we're thinking later on to the future.
This possible threat is one reason why the Trump administration has been pushing so hard for a so-called Space Force. U.S. military officials have told CNN the Russians have already developed a satellite called Cosmos 2499. They've nicknamed it Kamikaze because they say it could at some point have the capability to go on the attack and slam into American satellites. Experts say the Russians could use satellites to jam American satellites, intercept or disrupt crucial communications.
A lot of our image surveillance reconnaissance means are space-based, so it's really more United States' ability to see in support of its forces that potentially is threatened.
America in the crosshairs. A new report from the Pentagon says that China is actively developing its fleet of long-range bombers and likely training its pilots for missions over the U.S. Joining me now, CNN military and diplomatic analyst, retired Rear Admiral John Kirby. This is alarming because China's been making military moves for some time to expand its military power and influence abroad. What do we see in this report?
This report, I think, makes clear that they have continued that process, that they view the first 2 decades of this century as an era of strategic opportunity to expand and develop what they call their comprehensive national power. This report lays out some very specific examples of how they're doing that. So let's take a look at them. They're giving the Chinese Air Force now a nuclear mission, the ability to arm bombers, as you said, Jim, with nuclear missiles that could actually go as far and perhaps be as accurate to attack U.S. targets. They're, again, that's for the training of their pilots. They're also modernizing the People's Liberation Army to be able to conduct complex joint and out-of-area operations, something we've not seen the Chinese Army able to do.
Until this point, they'd focused their attention on their borders and the immediate surroundings. So now they want to be able to project power where the U.S. is dominant.
Exactly. It's not just about area dominance now, it's power projection in an expeditionary way out of area and across the globe. Also, in keeping with that, they're expanding their ring of bases. So we've talked about the bases in the 9-dash line, in the sphere of influence they're creating in the South China Sea, but they're also now trying to contract for and build bases in countries around the world, Pakistan, Djibouti. They really want a more robust global footprint.
Now, the other big adversary, of course, is Russia. And folks, of course, think of Russian cyber attacks, interference in the election, etc. But in space, there's a new satellite that's drawing the attention of the U.S.
This has really flummoxed experts. We're not exactly sure, nobody's exactly sure what this satellite is meant to do. They have been observing very weird behavior from it. It has been sidling up to other Russian satellites. It's been directing itself even to stages, launch stages that put it into orbit. It's been kind of moving over and around them. So it's got some sort of self-movement capability. In addition, it appears to be able to launch sub-satellites, smaller satellites out of it. You can see in this video here that it can do that. Now, what we're not clear is if this is just purely peaceful. Is it a repair and refueling capability? Or is there a more sinister intent here to maybe weaponize space or to be able to knock out other satellites?
And that, of course, would significantly hurt the U.S. because we're very dependent, both civilian and military, on satellite capabilities. So is the U.S., I mean, one of the big debates has been, does the U.S. then weaponize in space to deter and respond to attacks?
Well, it's a very interesting question, controversial. But if you can get the clues for where the United States is going by looking at the National Defense Authorization Act that the president just signed, which authorizes a space warfighting policy and tells the Department of Defense to stand up the Space Command. Not the Space Force, the 6th military branch, but a unified branch. Also, look at the National Defense Strategy. If you just look at the first page, these two sentences sit side by side with one another and clearly make China and Russia adversaries of the United States.
And they always, whenever I speak to intelligence officials, they always put China and Russia at the top of their list of threats.
And that's right
here.
here.
It is right there. Admiral John Kirby, thanks very much.
There is still no comment this morning from the Vatican about that devastating report that identified more than 1,000 child victims of predator priests over 7 decades. For many, Pope Francis' silence is deafening.
At Wednesday's appearance in St. Peter's Square, a noticeable omission. Pope Francis not saying one word about the shocking grand jury revelations in Pennsylvania. Horrific allegations that 300 predator priests violated more than 1,000 children, enticing them with alcohol or pornography, ending in molestation or rape. He prayed for the victims of the Genoa Bridge collapse, but offered no comfort to the abuse victims. Raising the question for many Catholics, where is the signature compassion this Pope has become known for? From sharing his birthday meal with the homeless to spending time with the sick and disabled, even bringing Syrian refugee families to Italy on the papal plane.
We actually know how furious the Pope is about it. We actually know how frustrated he is about it.
New York's Cardinal Dolan says that omission should not be misinterpreted.
He was somewhat defensive of the bishops in Chile, and he found out, boy, that was a mistake. I should have listened to the victims more. So he's learned the hard way, like we have.
In this country, while there have been words of apology, so far little action by the U.S. bishops, especially about those church leaders the grand jury said covered it up by moving abusive priests around. Again, all eyes turn to Rome.
If only the Pope is someone who can discipline or take action in a bishop, then the people in the pews are definitely calling for the Pope to do that.
Sean Doherty, who says a priest abused him, is not waiting for the Vatican. He's putting his faith in the Pennsylvania legislature, working to convince that body to eliminate the statute of limitations for child sexual abuse.
I don't know what is more shocking or more on than this report. So if this doesn't do it, I mean, we're in real trouble as a society, I think.
Now, whenever a story like this is in the news, more people come forward, and that's what's happening in Pennsylvania. The Attorney General's office reports its hotline has got more than 150 phone calls and emails since that grand jury report was released on Tuesday.
And I'm sure so many people are waiting for Pope Francis and probably wondering why nothing was said recently and wondering when he'll speak.